Boys, I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. First of all, welcome to the stream. Good afternoon. I wasn't planning to stream today. This is going up on YouTube, so hello YouTube. Say hello everyone. I also, I nicked myself. I didn't really nick myself shaving, but I forgot to put on some moisturizer, so my face is really red. It's kind of embarrassing. This isn't the best look for me right now, so don't worry about it. Alright. I wasn't planning to stream today. Because I went to go watch Gladiator II. And I knew it was going to be bad, and I made a video on it. And it got a decent amount of views, right? Like, everybody knew it was going to be bad. Everybody. Like, the trailer was bad. The premise was bad. No one went into this movie with any assumption that it was going to be good. Nobody. Nobody.
Are you not entertained?
No, I'm not entertained. And that's amazing timing. Thank you for... I am so glad that's in there. Because no one at the theater was entertained. There was 7 people in the theater. There was 7, including me. And there was an old couple who were sitting in the front with their big old popcorn, and the old man fell asleep and was snoring within 30 minutes. It was really funny. And then there was a couple people behind me. Most people were just by themselves, except for this old couple, which was really cute actually to see them. They were probably in their 60s or maybe early 70s. It was really funny. It was English with Japanese subtitles. It's almost so bad it's good. And what I mean by this is, in the end, spoiler alert, Rome good. Rome can only be good because no matter what happens full circle, the end has to be, well, we're Roman at heart, strength, and honor, and we have to find the old virtues we held on to. And so, despite the movie trying so hard to escape the imperialism bad, and we've got to, you know, embrace our barbarian roots, at the very end, it's like, oh, there was a dream that was Rome, and we have to revitalize it. I'm like, oh, so you're back on the Roman side now. But despite telling me how awful this place is the whole time, it was wild. But before we get there, that's the end. Before we get there, we have to wade through the pile of garbage that was this I think it was, what, 2.5 hours? I lost track of time. Like, halfway through the movie, I really had to pee, and I was holding it for dear life, because I did not want to miss anything. It was, despite knowing what was going to happen, I still didn't want to miss it, because I wanted to be able to talk about it. So the movie starts out. I'm already laughing. I'm already laughing because the premise is so dumb. It's so dumb. So, it starts out, and you meet some guy. And some guy is kind of mixing grain with his hands. And some woman with facial tattoos is hanging laundry. And he shoos away a chicken, and the woman's like, oh, be gentle. And, you know, they have a little lovey-dovey scene. And then a man comes, or they hear a signal, and the drums in the distance come. It's like, oh, the Romans are coming. The Romans are coming. Where are we, by the way? We're in Africa. Y'all are already Romans. What's happening here? Y'all are already part of the Roman Empire. You've been part of it for hundreds of years. And so they go through this, like, mind-numbing, like, maybe 15-minute scene of a vastly diverse cast. Like, I've never seen so many black people in Northern Africa. And if you're watching this, we're like, what do you mean? Like Africans are you know, black people from Africa, blah, blah, blah. North Africa. When Septimius Severus, the first emperor from Africa, saw a black person from the first time, he cursed him and thought he was bad luck. Okay, these are not common folk. This was not the common empire that you're thinking of. All right? Yet, I swear to God, 3rd century Rome, because this is in the early 200s, is the New York City of antiquity. Holy God, I've never seen so much color in ancient Rome. And for some reason, like, all of Africa, by the way, is either black people or Arabs. Like, they're all black people or Arabs. I don't know where the Arabs came from, but there's a lot of, like, turban wearing in here, but I was like, wait a minute. I think that's an Arab thing, right? They're over to the east. We're a long way from Arabia, boys, and we're in Africa, right? We're in the bread basket of the empire, because North Africa used to be the bread basket, right? That's where, like, a lot of the grain shipments came from. Anyway. So, nameless man and his wife, face tattoo lady, don armor, they do each other's armor, they give each other a kiss, and the Romans invade. All right, so a Roman fleet is coming, and let me just describe to you the city. All right, the city that they're invading is a coastal city where the walls are built into the water, as in the walls come up from the water. There's no shore. Like, the walls were built from maybe 5 feet underwater up. All right, so there's no place to land. It's literally a wall. It's like the cliffs of Dover. All right, and the Roman general, Cassius, who's a main character in this, decides the best way to attack the wall is to ram boats into it with siege towers attached to them, and then try to storm the walls with this. It's incredible. Like, motherfucker, just land on a beach down, go 5 miles down the coast, land on a beach, and come around. What are we doing here? You're ramming your whole fleet into a wall. You think those ships are gonna be useful after this? You're ramming into a wall, son. I was shocked. I was shocked. Now, it's like, it's very cinematic, you know, there's all these catapults. For some reason, there was a trebuchet, but I'm pretty sure the Romans never used trebuchets, or I don't even think trebuchets were invented until a bit later, to be honest. Catapults were around, and, you know, of course, ballistae were like a major part of it. Scorpions, things like that. Like, Roman siege engines were very sophisticated. But there was a trebuchet, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't think that's part of what the people had back here. But this is all like nitpicking, right? This has nothing to do with the story. It's just me, like, being semi-autistic with what I'm seeing on the screen. So, you know, of course, the face paint lady, the wife, gets shot in the chest by a Roman archer. Her husband, man, his name's Hanno. He screams, he's like, no, and then he gets hit in the back of the head and he falls in the water. And so, you know how, like, in Gladiator I, Maximus, his spirituality, his soul, his connection to his home and his family that was murdered is the wheat, right? And when he's dying, and even when he's dreaming, right? He's passing through, and his hands are going over the fields of wheat, and he's hearing his son in the distance, and he can see his home, and it's like, that's like where he's yearning to go, right? He's a man yearning to go home. And it's spiritually beautiful. It's religiously beautiful. It's everything that you can. The context, the meaning is immediately conveyed to you as the watcher, because yes, Maximus is a general. Yes, he's he spent his life in the legions. He's fighting for Rome, but he has a wife. He has a son. And he's been part of the Marcomannic Wars, because the Gladiator I is taking place toward the end of the Marcomannic Wars, right? Which is a long, long period of war. This is over a decade. So many of these people who he's fighting with, he's probably known for 15, maybe even 20 years, maybe he was in Persia before, right? He might have joined the Legion with people who were teenagers, and now they're in their 30s. All right, this is not a short conflict. So he's a man who's spent the most of his adult life at war. He's accomplished. He's smart. He's well-read. He's all the things you want in a soldier. He's loyal to the emperor. He's loyal to Marcus Aurelius. But his heart, his soul is in the fields, on his farm, with his wife and with his son. It's the quintessential idea of the old Roman warrior, right? They were warriors. Yes, they would be called to defend the Republic, but in their heart they are the citizens, the citizen soldiery, right? They aren't just soldiers. They are the people of Rome themselves, right? When I'm still on the first scene, by the way. When face paint lady dies, I don't know her name, I forgot. It's a weird sounding name. And Hanno, the main character, who spoiler alert is Lucius. It's the kid of Lucilla, the daughter of Marcus Aurelius, so grandson of Marcus Aurelius, essentially. He gets knocked into the water. He's knocked unconscious. His moment, like his spiritual movement, is he wakes up in a black and white world, and he's waking up on a bed of stones, right? They're very smooth stones, and so he wakes up in this world. And in the distance, he sees his wife, and she's like, it's basically like crossing the River of Styx, right? And so he's shouting, he's like, no, don't go. And she's, she crosses the river. She's already dead, right? She got a fucking arrow through the chest. She's gone. She's donezo's. I don't even remember her name. No one cares. No one cares. No one cares what happened. No one cares about these people. No one even cares about this guy. Whatever. So, Hanno he wakes up on the beach, he's washed ashore. Somehow he finds the corpse of his wife, and he cries. He's like, oh, woe is me. And he gets taken prisoner by the Romans, who have taken the city by ramming boats into a wall. And he gets taken prisoner with the leader of the city, who is a big black man, along with all the Africans you might see in 1964 Libya. That's how I describe this city. We are in modern day Libya, or semi-modern Libya. Like Old Mate was defending. He was defending. Old Mate was defending this innocent African city from a Roman invasion, despite it being part of Rome. Don't ask questions. It doesn't make sense. The writers don't know what they're doing. I don't know what I'm watching. All right, nobody knows. Nobody knows. They could have made something out of this. You know what I mean? Caracalla famously sacked the city of Alexandria because apparently they were putting on a play of like Romulus and Remus, and the brothers, the founders of Rome, and Caracalla had famously killed his own brother, and so he took offense to that and he sacked the city. But this was like, Caracalla was fucking crazy. And we'll get to Caracalla. Caracalla's in this, and Getta's in this too. So, then it starts, right? Then it's like, we are the last free people. Rome only has what it steals. It's like the propaganda is in full force from minute 5. Like from minute 5, it's Imperium am bad. All their land is stolen land. They are the enemies of the free people. So the propaganda is in full effect, right? The whole thing is basically Rome is modern America, and it's like it's basically like everything over there is theirs because everything they own is only theirs because they stole it. And because they're bad and they're a rot, they're a poison. Like Rome is poison. Like the Roman dream is a lie. It's this is all here to put you into the system and shit you out. Blah 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 blah. All right. So Hanno gets taken prisoner. He and Big Black Man gets sold as slaves. I don't know his name either. I'm sorry. I don't care. I don't care what his name is because he dies instantly. He has a broken arm. They get sailed into Ostia, so the port of Rome, where, as far as I can tell, there's no break. They get off the boat, they get marched to a small arena, and immediately they get in chains with no weapons. They have to fight literal demons. They're supposed to be CGI apes. They are demons. They are actual, literal demons that these people are fighting, not only unarmed, but still bound in chains. So, Big Black Man just sits on his knees and lets one of the demons tear out his throat. And Hanno's like, oh no, Big Black Man. And he starts fighting the ape that killed Big Black Man with his bare hands, who's a demon. And he starts like, he has, he's in chains, right? So he starts like whipping his chains around and hitting the ape. And somehow this wrangly ass ape gets stuck in a headlock by Hano, and he starts choking it out, and he bites his arm. I mean, Hano bites the ape's arm. So they start making fun of him after this. He's like the ape eater, right? And it goes nowhere. So while this is going on, in the stadium is Denzel Washington. Oh yeah, we knew it was gonna come. Here he is. Denzel Washington. His character's named Macrinus. Now, if you're a history fan in here, if you're an enjoyer of the histories, you will know that Macrinus was an emperor of Rome who deposed Caracalla, who is the current emperor of Rome, along with his brother Geta. In the movie, Emperor and Caracalla are twins. They're not actually twins, but they're meant to be the twins, and it's supposed to be like, oh, they're like Romulus and Remus. They're the twins. It's the twin emperors. They weren't actually twins, and they hated each other, but in this one they like kind of get along mostly. And they're demon apes, by the way. So Macrinus, I was like, okay, so this is like a race recasting of Macrinus because we need to have a black African emperor of Rome because that's what happened. Just like Cleopatra. She wasn't Greek. Get it through your heads. Africa and black. Jesus, so dumb. So he watches this guy bite the arm off an ape, and he says, wow, this is great. And he buys Hano as his own personal gladiator. He takes Hano to his little gladiator camp, and he has him train up. And he's like, I like you, Hano. You're really angry, and I could use someone who's really angry. And he's like, well, what do you want, Hano? And Hano's like, well, I want the heads of all the entire Roman army. Denzel Washington laughs at him. He's like, oh, no, I can't do that. Well, okay, just General Cassius then. And he's like, okay, I can make that happen. So, whatever, you know what I mean? It's just yapping. It's yapping, and then there's like a bunch of other like scenes about how bad Rome is. For some reason in Rome, all the poor people are brown skinned. Rome is an extremely ethnically diverse city, and all the homeless and poor people begging for food are people of color. But the Senate, surprisingly, also included black senators. And I was like, wow. All right, they did it. They actually included a little bit of evil black people here too. So yeah, it's the Clarence Thomas effect, I guess. So they're like, okay, they had, it still doesn't make any sense. I want to clarify this. There were no black senators. There's not an ethnically diverse Senate in Rome. This was the oligarchy here. This is the Roman Senate at its height. We have no evidence, as far as I know, of any like black, like I'm talking about like sub-Saharan African black senators. But, it's a movie and everyone's colorful, so why not? I can't even remember what happens next. They go into the arena, and wouldn't you know it? I need to point this out. Okay, this was I'm already starting to forget the movie because it's so forgettable. This made no sense, but Hano, so Lucius, remember, the main character is the kid from Gladiator 1. It's the little kid. He fights like a fucking god. This is another thing that made no sense. He is an absolute madman, and he can like wield every fucking weapon, and he's slicing heads off, and he's slicing arms off all the time. This is a kid who was born in the purple. What does that mean? It means he was the son, he's literally in line. He's an heir to be the Emperor of Rome. He is the grandson of Marcus Aurelius. Commodus doesn't have any kids, so he could be considered an heir apparent. He missed the Marcomannic War because he was too young, so he was raised in Rome. This is the quintessential rich boy, right? He's not Maximus at all. He's got no military training. He's spent his days either in school with his tutors or with Commodus, like watching the Gladiator games, right? This is not your hero character who can take down people with ease. And maybe you think, well, you know, he had a rough childhood. He went to Africa. Africa's like the safest place in Rome. He went, so the whole story is with him, is that after the events of Gladiator 1, his mother says, it's too dangerous for you to be here because you're the heir apparent. I'm going to send you away. Go take him somewhere so I don't know where he is. So he gets taken to Africa, and he spends some time there, but the Romans, some Romans are hunting him down. You never find out who or what or why. So he's like running from place to place, and he ends up in Numidia, and that's where he grows up and gets married and things like that. And he basically grows up to like hate Rome completely. You know, for reasons I don't know. And he hasn't taken part in any campaigns. I need to stress this fact. He is a rich boy who grew up in Rome and then spent time in Africa, which is by far, it's not even close. Maybe Spain it would be the other one, but by far Africa is like the most insulated, problem-free area where you're not going to, you know, be worried too much about barbarian invasions. Yeah, there's some like Saharan oasis tribes who would like raid caravans sometimes, but they were not like sacking the major cities. You know what I mean? They weren't like declaring war and actually taking territory from the Romans. They were a nuisance, right? These were annoying desert dwellers who the Romans would eventually deal with under Septimius Severus. But even that, it's just like they were never like the biggest deal. So he spent his adolescence in safety. He had his childhood in the luxury of Rome, and he's never been in the army. But from scene 1, he's fighting trained Roman legionaries who are guaranteed veterans of campaigns because, you know, between the Marcomannic Wars and where this takes place, you have, you know, the campaigns against Persians, you have campaigns against the Picts, you're in Britannia, you still have conflicts with the Germans. These are guaranteed, like, veteran legions that are ramming their boats against a wall, but whatever. I keep running back to that because it's just so dumb. So, while this is going on, there's so many plots in this movie. This is another problem. There's so much going on with all these different characters. So you have Lucius, who's fighting in the arena, and he's just winning all his battles, easy peasy. His first battle is against a rhinoceros a guy riding a rhinoceros who throws the oh god, what do you call them? It's like a string attached to two balls, and you throw it, and they like wrap around people's feet. There's a word for these. Oh, they have a name. Bolas, yeah, bolas. Thank you. So he like hits people with the bolas, then he like runs them over with his rhino, and it's actually kind of funny. It's stupid as shit, but it's funny. So he fights Bola Man, and he destroys him. And while this is all going on, that's like the main character, right? But it's not really the main character. So while this is going on, his mother, Drusilla, is still alive, and she's remarried. So she's married to Acasius, the general who invaded Numidia and who had his wife killed. Oh no! Shocker. So Acasius meets with Caracalla and Geta, the emperors, and they're, you know, oh, you're so great. There's so much more we can do. This is, you know, you can go to, we're going to attack Persia. We're going to attack India. We're going to take over everything. It's like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. He's like clearly affected by the campaigns he's fighting, because he's sent people to die by ramming his ships into walls that are 40 feet high. I mean, great general, I guess. He goes back to Drusilla and he says, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to usurp. So now we have two main plots. We have Lucius, who's now a slave and a gladiator. We have Drusilla, his mother, her husband, Acasius, who's the general, who are now planning to usurp during the triumphal games for him. So they're going to usurp on the 10th day. He has his army in Ostia because they've come back from the campaign in Africa, and so they're chilling in Ostia. They're on leave, basically. But he says like, okay, I've got one legion with me who are completely loyal to me. They'll march on Rome. So on the 10th day, we're gonna do this. And they've got some like senators backing them up. That's another story. Surprisingly, the emperors, so Caracalla and Geta, are almost just ancillary. Like they're just there to be ambiguously menacing and evil. Like Commodus was in Gladiator 1. Commodus is like the focal point of Maximus's revenge, right? He's like the focal point of all the corruption and the malignance and everything bad in Rome is just kind of like forced into that one character of Commodus, right? And Joaquin Phoenix does a great job. Like, everybody who watched that movie probably wanted to punch Joaquin Phoenix in the face when they saw that. It's amazing. So, in this one, Caracalla and Geta you don't really get any backstory from them. Like, you don't know how they became emperors. You don't know why they're emperors. They're obviously, like, delusional and crazy. For some reason, like, Geta is, like, the taller one who has, like, more of kind of a mind of a politician, and the shorter one who's, like, fatter is Caracalla, the guy who actually killed Geta to become the emperor in real life. And he's, like, has a pet monkey, and he's just, like, toying with it, and he's, like, he's basically supposed to be like Caligula. A spoiler alert, there's a scene where he makes the monkey a consul. He makes the monkey a consul of Rome. It's the best scene in the movie because that's how I felt. I felt like all of us were that monkey, right? We're just like, we've been forced into this situation where we're not even supposed to be here anymore. We're just sitting in a chair, like, watching what's happening around us. Yes, it's a little monkey. It's like a little, I don't know what you call these things. They're like the little chimps you see in, like, bazaars in the jungle, you know what I mean? Who, like, steal your banana and stuff like that. This movie is obsessed with monkeys, dude. It's for some reason monkeys are like the big thing this movie wants to sell. They want you to have, like, really be into monkeys. I don't know why. So, Caracalla and Geta are, like I said, they have nothing to do with the main character. They have no motivations, really. They're just like cardboard cutouts of villains who you're supposed to just look at and say, "Oh, Rome bad," and they're like, "Yes, Rome bad." And everyone's starving. It doesn't matter. Despite the fact that the grain dole exists and Rome probably didn't have this kind of beggar issue because you're all getting free shit all the time, so why are there so many people saying, feed me on the streets? Whatever. And then we have a third story, and that's Macrinus. And that's Denzel Washington's character. And he's so stupid. He's basically like a political manipulator, and he's like gotten rich by being a weapon seller. Ape good, Roman bad. You're right. He's like he's a weapons provider. Like, he's like, oh, like Drusilla meets him and she's like, oh, you supply the legions with all their weapons. Like, what the fuck? Like, what kind of corporatism is this? Like, what do you think Rome had back then? Like, do you think there's like these megacorp weapons providers who were selling gladiuses to Persia under the, you know, the Persian contra of gladiuses and scutums? Like, the one guy who supplies all the weapons, like, clearly, like, oh, you know, it's, I was like, what is happening? Yeah, the black guy's the arms dealer. What are they trying to do here? Are they undermining their own message? I don't know. So, he goes to visit Drusilla because he's on the rise. He's becoming very friendly with the emperors. He's getting into their good graces. He's providing them with entertainment. And part of that is he wants to get in with, like, all the other senators so they know him because he's, like, manipulating his way so he can become emperor of Rome. Oh, God. So that's, like, he's doing his plot, right? So that's, like, 3 main plots in the movie that you have to follow, and they're all happening at different times. And this is, again, 2.5 hours movies. 2.5 hour movie. I'm sorry, there's a fourth plot. Hold on. So we have no. What did we say? So we have Hano. No, I mentioned it. So we have Hano. We have Acacius's rebellion. We have Denzel Washington's usurpation that he's doing via different means. And then that's basically it. And then there's something else, but I'm not gonna talk about it yet. Hopefully it's monkey related. So what ends up happening is one of the senators who's in the conspiracy with Drusilla and Acacius, who's Pedro Pascal, loses a huge wager to Denzel Washington, and he loses. He's a gambling addict. He loses everything he has, and Denzel Washington's like, well, the way you can pay me back is to give me information. So he exposes the plot against the emperors by Drusilla to Denzel Washington, and Denzel Washington takes the information to the emperors, to Caracalla and Geta, and gets Drusilla and Acacius arrested. Caracalla tries to just kill him right there, but Denzel Washington is like, no, you should have them fight in the arena, or at least have Acacius fight in the arena and meet his death in front of everybody. Like, let the gods decide, right? That's his line. Oh, by the way, while all this is happening, Drusilla finds out that Hano is Lucius and goes to visit him, and he says, I hate you, Mom. Rome is bad. You guys took everything from me. Go away. Get out of here. Never talk to me again, Mom. It's not a phase, Mom. That's like word for word what happens when they meet. It's wild. And she's like, I'm sorry I had to send you away, but I was worried about you. And he's like, no, Mom. You're part of the system, Mom. You're the enemy, Mom. Oh, God, it was so dumb. This guy. I'm like, Lucius's character is so... He's supposed to be the hero, and he's just a plank. He's a 2x4 in human clothes. He's just good at everything despite not having any training in any of these things. He hates Rome and fights because he wants to tear it down. But when Denzel Washington is like, oh, I want to tear it down too, all of a sudden he's like, no, you can't do that. I don't like you anymore. Denzel Washington's like, the fuck are you talking about? It's wild. It's wild. Like these two men supposedly have the same objectives, but I guess this is what happens when you're a usurping cunt, is everyone just hates you even if they're on your side. There's one good scene in this movie, and this occurs. It's one of the arena fights, and it's the arena battle where they flood the Colosseum, because this is what they did in real life. They literally flood the Colosseum, and they put motherfucking boats in there. They put biremes in there, and they have them battle, and they are ramming the shit out of each other, and they put sharks in the water. They put motherfucking sharks in the water to eat you if you fall off. I don't know how they got the sharks, or how they transported them, or why they're in a freshwater arena, because this is all being fed from aqueducts from the Tiber and shit. It's not coming from the ocean. Don't ask questions. But it's kind of cool, and it's like the only scene where I was like, oh, this is fun. This is fun. If this movie wasn't so stupid, I would be having fun right now. And even despite the fact it was stupid, it was still like a cool scene to watch. Like on a cinematic production level, it was a fun moment in a drab film. And the Hano's Lucius Verus' character is on one boat. They have different gladiators on a different boat. Lucius Verus wins, and then just after that, is what I just mentioned. The plot gets exposed, and his mother gets arrested. Okay. So Acacius gets arrested, and Caracalla and Geta send him to fight in the arena to the death. They said, you're going to die in the arena. He takes on 4 trained Praetorians, 1v4. He kills them all without taking a single hit. And then they send Lucius to kill him. No one knows who Lucius is yet, except for Drusilla, Acacius, and Denzel Washington has figured it out, but he hasn't said anything yet. Remember, Denzel Washington technically owns him. He's Denzel Washington's slave. Oh god. Okay, so he sends Acacius in to the arena to fight. They send Lucius to fight Acacius, and Lucius, because Acacius is the one who's responsible for his wife being shot with an arrow in the chest. You know what I mean? He's like going ham on him, and Acacius is like, wait, stop! I know who you are. Like why are you fighting me? Like, this is, I know who you really are. You're not supposed to be here. You're the grandson of Marcus Aurelius. Like, you shouldn't be here. You should be, up there. But the guy, he's too angsty. He's the anti Marcus Aurelius. He's too angry. He's just like wailing on him. He's like, I don't care. You killed my wife. I'm gonna get you. And so they fight, and eventually, Acacius is kind of beating the shit out of him. Actually, it's really funny. Acacius gets disarmed, and then he just goes down on his knees. He's like, you know what? I'm not gonna kill you. And Caracalla and Geta stand up, and they're like, no, you have to kill him. They do the thumbs down thing, and they're like, kill him. And the crowd's chanting, no, mercy, mercy. And so Lucius throws down his sword, and he's like, I'm not gonna kill him. And while this is happening, a huge amount of Praetorian guards have entered the arena. Not in the arena in the sands, they've entered the stands with the people. And they take out their bows and arrows, and they point them at the people in the stands, and then Caracalla shouts at them to kill Acacius, so they turn around, and they turn Acacius into a motherfucking porcupine. They porcupine his ass. He's got arrows coming out of everywhere. And Drusilla, they make Drusilla watch this. She's like, no, Acacius, And then they point him at the people. They're like, everybody shut up, calm down, blah, blah, blah. And, what's his name? Lucius gets up and he's like, oh, if this was a hero of Rome, if this is what these emperors are going to do to him, imagine what they'll do to you. And everyone's like, yeah, you're right. Let's riot. And so they go on a riot. So now there's a riot in Rome. Lucius goes back to his cell because he's still a slave. And the riots are starting to get worse, right? It's people riot. So now we're back in the Imperial Palace, and Denzel Washington has his moment, right? He sees the brothers start fighting with each other. He sees Geta throws his wine at Caracalla, and Caracalla's like, well, it's not my fault, blah, blah, blah. And so Caracalla runs away, and he starts hiding under a table in the fetal position. And Denzel Washington is like, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of him. He says this to Geta. So he goes over to Caracalla, and he's like, hey, your brother's actually planning to blame this all on you, and he's gonna have you executed. And of course, instantly fooled, he's like, I'm not gonna let him do this. So he takes a knife and he attacks Geta, and he's stabbing him, and Denzel Washington is standing right behind him while this is happening, and Geta's like, help me. And Denzel Washington's like, okay, so he puts his hand on Caracalla's arm, and he's like, guides the knife into Caracalla's throat, and it's like, oh boy. And he's like shaving his throat and inward in with several strokes. It's kind of disgusting, but so dies Geta. Caracalla is now the sole emperor of Rome. Okay, I need to slow down. Caracalla takes Denzel Washington to the Senate House. He takes Denzel Washington to the Senate House while Denzel Washington has Geta's head in a purple bag. And Caracalla, who's out of his fucking mind, says, I'm going to be appointing the 2 new consuls. By the way, this is the first time the word consul is even brought up in the movie. If you are a novice to Roman history and you're seeing this movie for the first time, even if you saw Gladiator I, you will probably not know what a consul is, or why it's important even in this stage of the Empire, when essentially it's like it's not like a majorly powerful position, because the most power has been, you know, subsumed into the position of emperor. For brevity's sake, in the Republic, every year there were elections for consul, and every year there were 2 consuls. So if you're an American, right, if you're in the U.S., you know you vote for a president every 4 years. There's one president, and he rules for 4 years, and then in 4 years' time, there's a new election, and you can elect someone else. In Rome, it happened every single year. And they didn't elect 1, they elected 2. And if that sounds a little bit convoluted, like the consuls would butt heads, it was. So consuls in Rome, the way they worked this out is they basically took turns on a month-by-month basis on being the lead consul, right? They called it holding fasces. So fasces were like the bundle of sticks with the axe coming out of it. That's what fasces are. And the consul who was holding fasces had like the power of you know, like calling meetings and putting things to votes and so on and so forth. Famously, when Julius Caesar was consul, right, in 59 BC, so you might ask, who's going to hold fasces first? How do they decide this? The consul who gets the most votes becomes the fasces holder for the first month. So in January, they hold the fasces, and then February, it's the one who got the second most. That's who becomes the second consul, and they switch back and forth. So January, March, February, March, April, May. They go back and forth, back and forth. In Caesar's case, his co-consul Bibulus, essentially after the second month, was hated so much he ran away to his home, and he said, "I'm not coming out anymore, I'm scared." And so Caesar got to hold fasces for his entire term, which is a very rare thing, and that's how Caesar got so much done in his consulship. I'm going on a tangent about Caesar, but I want you, the watcher, to understand what a consul is. Essentially, it was the president in the times of the Republic. In the times of the Empire, it wasn't completely toothless. Like there was still authority, to call the Senate to vote and things like this. But the emperor could essentially like override all of this. Now, some emperors worked very closely with the consuls because they wanted that part of the power relationship to be maintained, right? Like the consul shouldn't just be a ceremonial position. It's like, no, the consul and Senate have a job, and they should be doing that job, right? It's not just me as the emperor who's just going to be making a decision about every little thing in the empire. It's like, you guys are the government. You need to govern, right? So Denzel Washington is in the Senate, the very ethnically diverse Senate. He's got a head in a bag. And Caracalla says, "I'm naming 2 new consuls." By the way, consuls, if you're going to name a consul, they're supposed to take power for a year. This is the thing. There's a vote in summer, and then the new consuls will take power in January, and they go from like January 1st to December 31st. They do the full year. So he decides to name consuls. Suddenly, do we know who the consuls were before this? We have no fucking idea. We don't have a clue who were the consuls before this. It's never been brought up. The observer, the watcher of this movie, is going to be like, what do we do? Who are these people? What are we doing here? And so Caracalla stands up and he points at the chair and he's like, "I name first consul my chimp." I forgot his name. And so the camera turns to the chair and his little monkey is on the chair and he's like eating some fruits. And everybody's looking around like, what do we do here? And then Denzel Washington is like, "To the monkey," and he starts cheering, and then all the other senators like, "Oh yeah," and they start cheering with him, and say they're cheering on the monkey. The monkey's like looking around, like eating his fruits. He's confused. We're confused. Everyone's confused. And then Caracalla says, "And his second consul." So this is hilarious, by the way. First consul. So the one who holds the fasces, the one in charge, is the monkey. The monkey is the senior consul. The second consul is Denzel Washington. So Denzel Washington has lost to the monkey. When if they're sitting in the seats at the Coliseum, the monkey has a more senior seat than Denzel Washington. Amazing. Great. This film is just falling over itself. You might be asking yourself, as I was, who is Denzel Washington? Not the man, the character, right? Macrinus. Who is this guy? Why is he doing this? Why is he, essentially doing all these political maneuverings? Why does he hate Rome? Why does he want to, he says, I want Rome needs to fall. I'm just going to give it a little push, blah, blah, blah. Lucius asks him this. And the audience is like wanting to know. It's like, well, who is this guy? Why does he have such peace? He says, you will never know. And I audibly laughed. I'm like, the writers don't know. The writers don't know. They don't know. They won't tell us. Because they don't know who this guy is or why he's so adamant on bringing down Rome. But I was wrong. I was fooled. It's even better. It's even better. In fact, it's the best plot twist I have ever seen in a movie. So it's the penultimate scene in the movie. Drusilla is getting sent out with the traitor senators to die in the Colosseum. So she's basically chained to a post. It's like kind of like Padme was in Attack of the Clones. You know, like Padme and Obi-Wan and Anakin are like chained to posts. It's kind of like that, except she's on a cart and she's chained to it. And then around the cart are all the senators who have betrayed him. But just before she gets taken out, this is great. I need to mention something before this. I forgot to say something. Just before she gets taken out, Denzel Washington comes to visit her. And, before this, when they first met, he's like, oh, I knew your father. I read his meditations. You what? His what? This isn't a published book that back then, boys. Like, his writings were taken and kept and preserved, but it's not like Romans across the empire were reading the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This is a modern thing that we now have published, but this was not like mass printed in the Republic. But he actually calls them the meditations. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so he quotes Marcus Aurelius a couple times. And so this, now at the end, that was the part I forgot to mention. At the end, Denzel Washington comes up to Drusilla. So, you know who I am? And he takes off his shirt and he reveals this brand on his chest. And he's like, does this look familiar? And he says, I was your father's slave. Oh no! Oh no, he was Marcus Aurelius' slave. So this means that he was a slave who Marcus Aurelius manumised, right? He gave him manumission, he freed him. He became a freed man. And this is only 20 years in the future, so this probably happened when he was fucking 50 years old, because Denzel Washington is 70 in this movie. Or 65, so he's a grown old-ass man. And from becoming a freedman of the Emperor, we don't know when this happened exactly, he becomes the most prolific arms dealer in the Roman Empire and one of the richest men in Rome. The motherfucker can't read. What? How has this even happened? If you are a freedman, you can't hold office. Your children can. But whatever, they're just throwing shit out there. They're just throw it out there, man. He's a slave. He was a slave. Now, what's even worse about this is there was an emperor, and his name was Pertinax, who came after Commodus. It's literally the timeline the movies are in. The ending is, we're getting to the ending. We're almost there to Vex, I promise. Pertinax was the son of a freedman. So his father was a slave who was freed. And he built up a little bit of a life for himself, and his son, Pertinax, joined the legions. He fought hard, he worked his way up, he became, a centurion, and then he worked his way up and he became an officer, and he was put in charge of centuries and then of legions. And this man earned Marcus Aurelius's respect. And he, after Commodus was assassinated, was chosen by the Praetorian Guard to become the next emperor. And now he was killed by the Praetorian Guard like 6 months later, maybe even less. But his story is amazing, right? Like, this guy is like, that's the story you want to hear about. This is like a rags to riches story, essentially, of a man who made his way to the top through nothing but pure skill and intelligence, right? We have that. That story already exists, and it's very interesting. This is not interesting. Denzel Washington is not interesting in this. Macrinus is not interesting. So, I'm going to speed it along to the end because it's already an hour long. The last fight scene happened. We're in the Colosseum. Drusilla is tied to a post on a cart. The Praetorians are standing, the senators are standing around her, and then around them in a ring is a ring of Praetorians. And essentially the emperor has said, okay, you can select one gladiator, and he can try to defend you against these like 20 Praetorians who are in a ring about you. Before this has happened, I'm sorry, I skipped a part, but it's so stupid and so funny. Before this has happened, Drusilla has secretly met with Lucius once again, somehow, despite being under arrest, and she has given him Maximus's ring, like one of the rings that he wore. And so Lucius gets a friend he's made, the doctor, like the doctor of the gladiators. I've forgotten his name too. He's like eye tattoo guy. He gets eye tattoo guy to take the ring to the Roman general who's in Ostia. That's like Acacius's general, the army who's supposed to usurp, and say, look, the true emperor, the grandson of Marcus Aurelius, is alive, and he's summoning your army for help. And so he goes, Ravi, yeah, sure, Ravi. So I tattoo Ravi, makes it, he rides the horse there, he gives him the ring, and then it's implied, it's like, okay, the army's marching on Rome on the day of this battle. So the day of the fight comes, the fight with Drusilla and the last gladiator match. And the gladiator master, kind of, I forgot his name too, he's like some fat guy. He presents Lucius with a wooden sword. He's like, this is your last battle. If you win it, you will have earned your freedom. And Lucius takes the wooden sword, kills the fat guy, starts a prison riot, kills everyone who isn't a gladiator in there, and then he gets Maximus's armor from the first movie, and he puts on Maximus's armor. And despite having killed everyone, he doesn't start a riot. They go back into their cells, and then they end up going to the Colosseum anyway, which they were going to do in the first place. I don't understand the point of this scene at all. They just killed all the prison guards, and then they go to the place that the prison guards were going to take them anyway? I think they did this to steal weapons and smuggle weapons in there. But I'm not sure. So what happens is... Yeah, but I don't understand how they get out and they join the fight anyway? Like, how did they get through that gate? Because there's still, like, they killed the Gladiator Arena people. Did they kill all the people in the Colosseum who are manning the gates and keeping them closed for? Like how many? Yeah, they had the keys, but I'm like, there has to be more people who were involved in this that they would have had to have killed. Because where are they? Like, I think they're not in the, like, the Colosseum basement here. They're being, like, ferried in sometimes. Either way, the point is, Lucius is supposed to battle these, like, 20 Praetorians alone. And just as the fight starts, the other gladiators burst out from the holding pens, and they all start charging the Praetorians. And Denzel Washington is watching this. He's like, "Oh, this isn't supposed to happen." And Caracalla is watching this. He's like, "Oh, this is great. This is great." He's like having the time of his life. They fight. All the Praetorians are dying. All the Praetorians in the stands who have bows, they're still there. They take the bows, they turn around, and they start shooting spectators. And a riot breaks out. And while this is happening, Denzel Washington takes a barb, or like a long pin, and he goes behind Caracalla, and he shoves it through his ear and impales him in the brain. And then he takes a bow, and he shoots Drusilla in the chest, so right as Lucius is about to free her. So Drusilla dies exactly the same way as wife of Lucius died. The exact same way. Arrow in the exact same spot. Wow, it's like poetry, it rhymes. And then something happens. And it's hard to talk about. Denzel Washington has gotten word that there's an army right outside the gates of Rome. So he sends the Praetorians, because there's like the urban cohorts, right? The Praetorian guard who's in the city, who's about roughly equal strength, slightly bigger, to go meet them and defend the city. And so after Denzel Washington shoots Drusilla, he gets on a horse, and he's killed Caracalla, right? So the emperor's dead. He's killed Caracalla. He's the sitting consul. He's technically the most powerful person right now. He gets on a horse. He rides to the front lines between the two armies, like at the Milvian Bridge or thereabouts. It's the entrance essentially to the city of Rome. Oh, you're right. The monkey is the most powerful. I'm sorry. Monkey is lead consul. So it's the monkey and then Denzel. So I'm sorry, you're right. I've been corrected by the chat. The monkey is the most powerful person in Rome now. You are correct. In this moment, all Denzel Washington has to do is say, "The emperor is dead. I am the consul. I have the power. You all can go back home now. It's done." He goes up to the front of the army. He's between the two armies. And while the riot is going on, Lucius also finds a horse. He rides past the entire Praetorian army. 6,000 men just watch him ride straight at the sitting consul. The sitting consul, the most powerful man, the second most powerful individual behind the monkey. They let him ride up, take out his sword, and attack the sitting consul, and no one's doing anything about this. Everyone's just watching. So 30-year-old Lucius starts wailing on this 70-year-old man. He's like beating this old black man to death, who's supposed to be the sitting consul, and people are just watching this happen. And Logan Paul versus Tyson. Yeah, it's actually unbelievable to see this, that this is a scene in a movie. It's wild. It's wild. So, long story short, Lucius kills Denzel Washington. And Lucius is standing alone between two armies. He's got no proof that he is who he says he is. No one knows who he is. 0 people in this situation know who he is. Nobody has a goddamn clue. He's literally just some guy who showed up on a horse and murdered the consul of Rome in front of 2 armies, and no one did anything about it. And he says, "The dream of Rome is dead, but we can rebuild it." Wow. And so the armies put away their swords, they put down their weapons, and they leave. They just go back home. Everybody just leaves. What? They... The irony of this is, the whole movie has been nothing but propaganda against, like, Rome, imperialism, Western history. This is the nation that is the thieves of the land of the proud, the noble savage, the native people. And the only good person, the only good Roman, is the self-hating Roman. It's Lucius. It's Lucius because he might be a Roman, but he's self-hating. He wants to take down the system. That's the good guy. I wonder if they're trying to draw any lines between modern society. But, in the end, Lucius, for all intents and purposes, is the new emperor. Because no one knows about Caracalla and Geta. Do they have any kids? No, they never said anything. He's the new emperor. And he's basically said, let's be Rome. Let's be the empire we should be. The final scene of the movie. Oh, by the way, the big moment, the emotional moment for Lucius, Maximus was his father. That's right. Maximus was cheating on his wife back home in Spain with Drusilla, and they were shacked up and they were fucking like rabbits. And so Lucius is actually the product of the extramarital affair of Maximus and Drusilla. So he is the son of Maximus and the grandson of Marcus Aurelius. I am not joking. The last scene is it's like in the dusk hours, or maybe it's like the pre-dawn hours. I'm not sure. It's kind of like a low light situation. Lucius goes back to the Colosseum, which has been completely cleared out except for the cart that his mother was tied to where she died. And he picks up the sand just like Maximus did when he was in the arena, when he was in the Colosseum, and he picks up the sand of the Colosseum, he's like wiping his hand, and he says, "Speak to me, Father." And he takes the sand and he holds it to his heart. And then the song starts playing, the "Now We Are Free" song starts playing, and the last scene is Maximus's hand going over the wheat. Oh. Oh no. Oh no, it's so bad. It's so bad. I hate it so much. Every character in this movie is bad. Nothing that happens makes any sense. I'm shocked. Like, I've seen bad movies, I've seen bad TV shows, but even in most things that are bad, like I'll talk, like Star Trek Discovery is genuinely a bad TV show, but it has some interesting characters here and there. There's some like funny moments, like, or there's a couple episodes like, oh, this is okay. Everything here is shit. No, you shouldn't. I disagree, Wolfstar. You should not treat historical fiction as a turn your brain off action movie. I think that's a shitty way to do historical fiction. If you're depicting, if you're choosing a fantasy setting and you're just like making shit up and people can be whoever you want them to be, it's fine. But this is a representation of what is essentially the greatest point of heritage for Western civilization, right? This is like, even though the story is fiction, the characters here, for the most part, are not fictional, right? These are real people who are being represented. These are, in some cases, real events being represented. When in Gladiator I, the very first scene is the last, what is essentially the last battle of the Marcomannic War. You see everyone acting in a way that makes sense for the situation. You have the barbarians shouting, you have the legionnaires and they're, doing their job. They've been doing this for decades at this point. You have, once it gets to Rome, you have the Senate and some of their machinations. You have Commodus and his increasingly like shaky hold on reality. And yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is playing a character, but he's also representing a historical person who, in a real way, is the cause of the decline of civilization, right? This is a person who is you can make fun of him, but he is, to quote Cassius Dio, the very famous Roman historian Cassius Dio, it is with Commodus that we went from an empire of gold to an empire of iron and rust. Commodus, despite being fictionalized here, right? He didn't die the way he did. He, in his heart, represents the first decline of a nation, the rot in a core of a human soul that manifests itself, that can be seen, and that people don't stop because people have become apathetic in their own ridiculous and gross wealth. They've become very self-interested, and it doesn't matter to them that this corruption exists and that this rot is there in front of them. It just matters, how can I take advantage of it? Caracalla and Geta, specifically Caracalla, could have been an interesting historical person to bring to the silver screen. Geta not so much, because Caracalla killed Geta like right away. Like, he was emperor for just a few months or something like that before Caracalla shanked him in front of their mother. With Caracalla, in the time period that this movie is taking place in, just to reinforce this idea, we are on the eve of the crisis of the 3rd century. All right, we are on the twilight of the era of the High Principate. Right, the Principate, the government, the system that Augustus installed after Caesar was betrayed and murdered in the theater of Pompeian Rome, that holy Divus Augustus brought up, that was so successful that for 200 years the West knew peace, stability, security, and for the most part, freedom. Okay? This era in history shouldn't be a turn your brain off and watch it moment. It should be I think it deserves a reverence when we're watching this and we're making content on it, even if we're fictionalizing some events, because even though, hey, I saw that, even though it's, even though things didn't happen that way, like creative sacrifices have to be made for the creative discipline, right? You're trying to fit a lot of information into a 2 to 3 hour film, right? I understand. You have to take some events and you have to either twist them or compact them or remove them in order to tell a story that makes sense in this amount of time. This is the art of filmmaking, right? Gladiator 1 did that very well. It did it extremely well. It didn't matter that the way Commodus dies in the movie wasn't how he died in real life. It didn't matter that Maximus' story he's like a fictional person who's kind of based like an amalgamation of some real Roman generals of the time. What mattered is the messages, the loss of societal integrity after their greatest king, the greatest monarch essentially, Marcus Aurelius. He is the embodiment of the philosopher king. There's always retards, right? So you can always tell a retard because a retard is a retard because they'll parrot some phrase that sounds cool, like power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'm a freshman at University of Hawaii. You know what I mean? When Marcus Aurelius was emperor, he remained uncorrupted for almost 20 years. He did not give in to any vice. He did not give in to any tyranny. He was the Stoic ideal. Marcus Aurelius essentially is the philosopher king, right? He is the leader that an empire, that a government the size of Rome required. And it's the ultimate irony in history that his son, Commodus, who takes over, is the antithesis of him, and all the virtue that Marcus Aurelius displayed in life was forgotten. Not just forgotten, but outright abandoned by the generations to come. The corruption was just too ingrained, and things were doomed to fail in a way. It was doomed after this because there was no one with the strength that Marcus Aurelius had to show up and who could take power without getting himself betrayed. And Caracalla and Geta are part of this system that's, like I said, it's on the eve of the fall and the collapse of Rome. For all intents and purposes, the crisis of the 3rd century was the collapse of the Roman world, which was only saved by the grace of the divine Aurelian, who praised the sun and brought light back to the west. But after that point, after the crisis of the 3rd century, we are out of of Augustus's Rome. That Rome is over. Now it's the Illyrican monarchs. It's the Tetrarchy. It's the changing of power from Rome to Constantinople. It's the development of substates like the Tetrarchy. So you had 4 emperors, 1 empire, and factionalization. The empire, for all it was in this time period, so in the 1st, 2nd, and early 3rd century, is gone. So when there's a movie about this, even though it's fictionalized, even though the events in it might not have happened, the source material is important to us. Because at least for me, and I'm assuming many of you here, I am a Western person. This is part of our history. This is our history, right? This is something, and when you're studying our history, it's something you should treat with more reverence than just a popcorn flick. Lore is important. Yeah, our lore is the real lore. And I think that this era has so much juicy potential. You know what I mean? There's so much that could happen that would be wonderful to see and bring to life. But the fact is, we live in an age now that has to say our history is bad. We are bad for being descendant of the people who lived that history, and we can't create anything that makes this history look good anymore because we might be manufacturing the enemy. Because don't you know, guys who are interested in Rome are actually part of the problem. Don't you know we're all secret fascists? Truly. It was awful. All right. I've yapped for an hour and a half. I'm going to upload this to YouTube. So say hello to YouTube, everyone here. Thank you for coming in and listening to me yap. It was bad in every way a movie should be considered bad. There was no person I would recommend this movie for. There is no redeeming qualities of this movie aside from a couple action scenes. You shouldn't see it. You shouldn't see it. No one should see this. And the writers who did this should be ashamed of themselves. And that's my opinion.